Tom, there was a time when people with disabilities were overlooked or often ignored in popular culture, but with the United Nations now estimating there are about 1 billion disabled people worldwide, it's a group that's becoming more visible these days in cinema, television and even in the fashion sector.
In fact, the industry has identified a $564 billion opportunity in what's being called adaptive clothing. Well, to shed more light on this, we're now joined by fashion journalist Patty Huntington. Hi, Patty. Lovely to see you. Good morning to you. All right, so adaptive clothing. Every week you give us these really interesting terms. Not many people would have heard it. What is it and where did it come from?
Well, look, as the name suggests, it's clothing that is adapted to the needs of people with disabilities or access needs, as many of them prefer to be referred to. So it's clothing that takes into account the various challenges. So, for example, Velcro and magnetic buttons instead of buttons and zippers, and you know, for wheelchair users, care has to be taken with the placement of seams and zippers to avoid chafing and pressure sores. And of course, for trousers and jeans for people in wheelchairs, there should be no back pockets. And then you've got the autism spectrum, which of course is very wide, and anyone with sort of sensory hypersensitivity, clothing tags can be an issue. Buttons can be an issue, and some heavy fabric. So it's clothing that has been adapted to the many varied needs of this huge sector.
It's really interesting because these are the things that most able-bodied people just would not think about. You just wouldn't think, well, I'm just buttoning up my blouse, isn't it? But then there would be people who would need magnetized buttons or Velcros, as you say. I find it interesting, too, that there are quite a few high-profile names that are promoting these adaptive clothing.
In terms of brands, but I should point out, even someone with arthritis in their fingers, would have problems with some clothing things. Yeah, look, there's been, in the past couple of years, there's been just sort of an ongoing sort of influx of brands. Tommy Hilfiger was something of an early adopter. Now, that's a celebrated American designer. In 2016, he launched Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive, now inspired by the needs of three of his own children and stepchildren who are on the autism spectrum. And it was so popular, he expanded it in 2017 to adult sizes. We have Target, which has done added adaptive clothing, selections to its popular children's line, Cat and Jack. And last year actually did adaptive Halloween costumes for children, which sold out, I believe. And this year they're going to expand that and add adult sizes. We have ASOS, we have Zappos. Nike, has launched, or like 5 years ago, launched a shoe called the Fly Ease. Now, that was after receiving a letter from a teenager by the name of Matthew Walzer, who wrote to Nike expressing his frustration that while he has cerebral palsy, while he was able to dress himself completely independently, still had to rely on his parents to do up his sneakers. So they developed a shoe with a wraparound zipper adaptation, and there's now over 20 styles. And here's Luke Gallagher, who's an athlete, became the first athlete with cerebral palsy to be signed by Nike in 2018, and he's helped test and develop this Fly Ease range. So, more and more. And look, we're seeing other initiatives too. Last year, early in 2019, in Auckland, New Zealand, we had the launch of an e-commerce startup. It's also a model agency, and now a content platform. They're doing this fantastic content called All Is For All. Now, that was co-founded by Angela Bevan, who's a communication specialist, and Grace Stratton, who is a law student with cerebral palsy. And Grace opened New Zealand Fashion Week last year, and a number of their models actually appeared on the runways, including Sophia Malthus and Rebecca Dubber. So in Australia in 2019, in November, there was another e-commerce startup called Every Human. So it's moving forward quite rapidly.
It certainly is, and it really is a very fascinating part of the fashion industry. I want to pivot now to talk about magazines. Of course, Patty, you would have heard this week 8 publications from the Bauer Media have folded. One of them, of course, being fashion magazine Harper's Bazaar. We're all going to miss this beautiful, glossy magazine. Yesterday, I spoke to the former editor, Kelly Hush, who said that she was really sad that this magazine had to close as well. But she also highlighted the fact that it's not just the magazine, it's the photographers, the makeup artists, the models, the art directors as well, who are going to be affected.
And not to mention the designers who have had, such a terrible time during the pandemic and need all the promotion they need. Well, look, it is a great loss. It's also, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, InStyle, 3 huge global brands, and a couple of others, Men's Health, Women's Health. And, I mean, that really does contract the kind of, I guess, diversity of the fashion magazine sector in Australia to, some indies such as Rush and Frankie, but, I mean, we've got Marie Claire, Vogue. I mean, they're kind of the winners, really. Bauer Media, you've got to remember that this comes on top of 5 years of strong double-digit advertising declines in magazines. The Australian magazine publishers, the luxury magazines publishers banded together and dropped out of the magazine audit. So, because they were so sort of horrified by their circulation figures. So obviously the audience was dropping off. The advertising has been dropping off. It's contracting worldwide by about 20% this year. And, I think a number of companies didn't pivot quickly enough to the digital challenges. That's been going on for over a decade. And the influencer marketing, the influencer marketing industry. Suddenly magazines which were producing these beautiful aspirational images were competing with, influencers taking their sort of photographer boyfriends to the world's most beautiful hotels and travel locations free of charge, doing sort of photo shoots and putting it on Instagram at a fraction of the cost that it costs magazines. So, some have pivoted. Bauer, cancelled Dolly a couple of years ago, and they've sort of rebirthed that as a brand called Syrup, which is digital only. I think it may occasionally have a print magazine moving forward. Playboy magazine in the US has just announced, due to the pandemic, it's suspending permanently its print publication, and it will pursue a digital-first strategy in the future. So they may come back. I think you've got department stores, fashion brands. So many businesses are suffering due to the extraordinary challenges faced in this pandemic. But they may come back. Let's hope so.
It certainly is a sign of the time. Patty, it is always good talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Patty Huntington.
My pleasure. And I've been wearing a mask out shopping for months, so it's good to see a lot more out there.
I would expect that it's a very fashionable mask.
No, it's a P2 mask. But then they've become the new norm, haven't they? So, I got them originally for the bushfires, but, they came in very handy. And when Woolworths Bowral, where I am at the moment, announced that it had a worker test positive, I was very glad I was wearing a mask that day.
I'm sure. Patty, thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks.